My husband hates leftovers.
Oh.
Fortunately, he has a couple other redeeming qualities, but there are only so many leftovers that I can eat or turn into something else to try to trick him into thinking it's a new meal. And my cats won't eat salads. This isn't something I think about necessarily or stress over every day, but when I see a homeless person on the streets, or when I hear about all the food drives during the holidays, it comes to mind. I think we all know in our heart of hearts that wasting food is bad. But in preparing for this speech, I wanted to learn a little bit more about this problem with some of the latest research. According to the EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency, the top item in our landfills is food waste, the top single item. And it's getting worse. Over the past 20 or 30 years, there's been a steady increase in the proportion of food waste in our landfills. Right now, it's about a quarter of the landfill space. And estimates from the USDA, that's the US Department of Agriculture, show that 30 to 40% of edible food produced each year is wasted. That's edible food. That's not counting inedible food, which you get the number a little higher, but we can't eat chicken feathers, of course. 30 to 40%. That's about $150 billion per year, plus the environmental consequences, for instance, increased methane production, etc. The US is the worst globally, North America. Europe is only slightly behind us. So this is a big problem. So when we think about food waste and food waste reduction, how many of you think about ideas like feeding your pets or composting? A couple of you. And these are what came to mind when I first started thinking about this topic. However, it's actually incredibly multifaceted. So the EPA has this pyramid that talks about the different components of food waste and food waste reduction. So up at the top is source reduction. So really just making less food waste. After that, feeding hungry people, animals, industrial uses, composting, and then lowest priority is the landfill. Lowest desired food waste strategy. So source reduction is not composting, is not even the cool company that I used to order from in the Bay Area, where imperfect produce is what it was called, where they would give us, funky, misshapen fruits and vegetables that no one wanted. That's even further down the pyramid. So we'll focus a little bit on source reduction. But even source reduction has a few components. Think the farming level. Can farmers become more efficient? There's the grocery store level, for instance, maybe with new technology and algorithms whereby they get to know their consumers better and the shopping habits, they could order the right proportion of things. And then there's the consumer level itself, and that's where we come in. So what do we know about home waste, home food waste? There are a lot of surveys out there, and I'll talk briefly about just a couple of them. One was conducted last year by the nonprofit organization, the NRDC. They surveyed 3 large cities, New York City, Denver, and Nashville, asking participants to weigh out their food waste and log it each week. They also did some dumpster dives to cross-check a few of these people. They estimated around 2.5 pounds per person per week of edible food waste.
That's true.
Another study by the USDA looked at multiple sources of government data, and they came up with around 1 pound per person per week. Still a lot, regardless of the number. Mm-hmm. The top waste items that both surveys found, I'll name the top one only: fruits and vegetables, apples in the NRDC survey. The USDA study, which was a massive study, had this incredibly simple conclusion. Increasing consumers' knowledge about how to prepare and store fruits and vegetables will be one of the practical solutions to reducing food waste. That's so simple, isn't it? But this is where we can focus the most. For instance, to make apples last longer, storing them in cold, dark, well-ventilated areas, not touching each other, and having them be clean and dry. How many of you do that when you store your apples? So how do we prevent food waste? Well, there's planning and storage and preparation, and I'll give you a handout after my speech that has a few really great tips. The NRDC survey found that a third of participants did no planning before they went to the grocery store. They didn't even look in the fridge, so they're just aimlessly wandering around the grocery store, probably hungry, getting everything that looks good to them, seeing that 99-cent sale for a dozen bagels. Who doesn't eat a dozen bagels, right? The storage and preparation aspect at home, maybe I can't tell you to eat more leftovers, but we can perhaps throw out less by knowing more about our shelf lives. You'll also see on the back of my handout that there is a handy chart you might want to put on your fridge to list out how long to keep things for, in case you don't want to trust your smell test only. There's also an app called Food Keeper that's from the FDA, and I think it's worth trying out if you're one to use apps, but it keeps distracting me on my phone because the icon says FK and I'm thinking it's swearing at me the whole time. Lastly, I think you need to become best friends with your freezer. And I don't mean just putting things in there as soon as you think they're going to spoil, but plan ahead. Think about putting freshly prepared things in there and maybe putting all your scraps in a bag for veggie broth later on. Love your freezer. It's not easy to change our food habits. But when we waste food, we also waste water, energy, agricultural chemicals, labor, and other resources. I've just thrown a lot of darts at you, but my hope is that at least a couple of them might stick so that we can think about this a little bit more. The NRDC survey found that 76% of the participants thought that they wasted less food than the average person. Fortunately, the outlook may be a little brighter. The EPA and the USDA have recently teamed up for a 2030 challenge with the goal to reduce food waste from the 30% mark to the 15% mark by 2030. I wish them well. Food for thought.